meetings compared to the other meetings that we have. I have thousands of meetings, literally.
And at the end of a 45-minute meeting, I've helped sick kids at the Starlights Children's Hospital, which is my chosen charity.
When you're first meeting someone, you're trying to build a connection. And with Meetings for Good, you just find the connections automatically there.
And when I actually think about what Meet Magic does and the opportunity to spend some time supporting the community of our vendors, but also being able to give back.
And when the opportunity presented itself to join Meet Magic, I jumped at it.
But these ones are different, and the reason they're different is because the vendor wants to meet with you and they're willing to put their money where their mouth is.
All of those meetings blur into one, but Meeting for Good is memorable.
It absolutely makes sense to do this, and I definitely recommend peers to engage with Meet Magic.
I must say, it's Friday afternoon, and I get really excited when I see Dave Cowan. It's pretty bad that I get excited when I see a man. But Dave Cowan's the CISO of Challenger Bank on that video there. And I've just had lunch with Dave and a couple of other people today. And just the inspiration that comes out of that guy's mouth for me, apart from him being a massive giver and an amazing human being, I just want to say a massive shout out to you, Dave. So thank you for your support. Now, for those that don't know or know about my story, I was raised in multiple council houses in the 70s with my roof-tired dad. And he had a new Jamaican wife who had 4 kids of her own. I left school at 15. I left home at 16. I became a dad at 19. I should have been dead by the time I was 21. I've never sat an exam, and I've never been to university. My name's Carl, and I'm the founder of a purpose-led software company called Meet Magic. It's a platform as a service company that gives executives and leaders an opportunity to give back by doing what they do every single day, meetings. So the Magic Room podcast really is all about showcasing purpose-driven leaders, change makers, but it's my way to share their story, because like me, everyone's got one. And the podcast theme is all about them. It's about who inspired them growing up, the mentors that they had, the vision that they've got for the future, tech leaders, and how they give back now. So if you're a leader and you want to be on the show, my show, you'll find a link in the post. It's called the Magic Mind Card. And it's really a test to see if you're a purpose-led leader and you want to give back. Now, next week, I think I've got some amazing podcasts coming up. I shouldn't really call them podcasts. Everyone's got one of them. But we've got, I think, Roxanne Sultan on Monday, and she's the Chief Digital Officer of Southern Cross Health in New Zealand, massive organization. So that's going to be a really fascinating chat. And also, we're preparing one at the moment with Craig Napier, who's the CTO of UTS, alongside a very clever AI team who actually spun out of the NBN. So that's really, really cool. But today, it's 5 o'clock. It's Friday. It's Crackerjack for any English people that know. I'm pleased to host David Pludek. I think that's how you pronounce his surname. But Dave's the Group CIO of Kip McGrath Education Centres. I'm going to bring Dave on stage to tell us how he got here. Dave, I hope you could hear any of that. Could you hear some of that?
I could hear all of it, Carl. It is Daniel, but you did spell my last name correctly, or pronounce my last name correctly.
I've done this twice now, Daniel. I actually called another lady something that completely different. This has become a bit of a theme for me. I'm so sorry.
Look, many people call me many different things.
Now, for those that don't know, Daniel and I have never, ever met at all. This is the first time. So this is completely random, off the cuff. We haven't prepared absolutely anything. I think I've given you a theme, literally, of how'd you get here. So that's pretty much the starting of the conversation. Where are you based, first of all, Daniel? Are you up in Brisbane?
No, so I'm physically based in Newcastle. Right. Our head office has traditionally been Newcastle based. However, we are transitioning to Sydney at the moment.
Good. So you pretty much like Brisbane then, because anything north of my area here in Potts Point is Brisbane, basically. We just don't go there.
Well, Brisbane's nice once in a while. It's grown up a lot.
It has. My daughter's up there at uni at the UQ. Been there for in her 4th year now. So it's kind of I've watched her. I must say, Maya, if you're watching this, I hate you. You know, you can't be my child and drive around in the car that I bought you with Queensland number plates. I mean, who does that? I mean, I bought that car in New South Wales, and she's now flipped it, and it's got Queensland number plates on it. I just want to vomit. Anyway, Daniel, tell us a little bit about yourself, and as a role, you're the group CIO for McGrath Education Centres. Tell us a little bit about who they are and how you got there.
So Kip McGrath Education Centres is a tutoring company that has been around since about 1976. We have centres across the UK, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. We're currently also expanding in the US. And we also have a separate brand in the US named Tutorfly, where we assist schools in lifting their capability and learning outcomes for their children. In addition to the traditional learning, we also provide our own learning management system that allows for individualized learning to help children learn at a pace where they'll be able to get the most benefit from that support.
It's a fascinating industry, the whole education. Who's that big Australian tech company that's just gone mental in the education space? Is it what they called? Go? Is it Go? Go One?
Go Ones went really well quite a few years ago. I haven't heard so much about them more recently, but they were very, very successful.
So are you kind of similar in the sense that you sort of bringing disparate students together and giving them an opportunity to get educated?
Similar. So Go One focuses on uploading of content, and people can consume that content as they like. We take a slightly different approach. So we offer what we call hybrid learning, which allows children to use our interface within a centre or a school where they can benefit from the digital content, or they can do it wherever they happen to be. So our content is geared specifically for helping children improve their English and maths, more so than a do-it-yourself type lesson. So everything we do is guided by a teacher, and our teacher develops lesson plans that are designed specifically for each child.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just saying, I left school at 15 and never took a single exam. And watching my daughter go into uni and going through school and then now uni, I've sort of lived it vicariously through her. She talks to me in languages I just don't understand it. And they're very, apart from the fact that these kids are super smart today, it's ridiculous. But the language, the structure of the schooling and the uni is just something that's so foreign to me. I feel sometimes like I feel very proud that I'm able to have conversations with people like yourself, because coming from where I've come from, with no education, I feel like I've had to learn it all myself and go self-educated wise, read books and whatever else. But it's a whole new world out there, and it's changing. You listen to people like Elon Musk. He reckons that YouTube should be the best teacher ever. You don't really need school anymore, almost.
The learning where it's developed, which I really love, and I do have 2 small kids, is the fact that there are so many ways people can learn these days. It's not just that go to school, and if you don't quite understand the content, you fall behind. My eldest, who's 12 now, learned to program through YouTube. So he writes his own games completely through YouTube. So the information is so accessible these days. It's amazing. And if they don't know something, they can just type it in, find an answer, watch another child or an adult do it, and then they're able to learn and mimic. So it's amazing what's available to people.
It totally is. Random question then, YouTube related. So what was the last thing you fixed by watching a YouTube clip?
So I don't use YouTube so much, although I did do my last cyber certification using YouTube videos just as a supplemental resource.
Right.
But I think, like everybody else, that whole AI GPT-4 sneaking into your day-to-day to, not necessarily replace what you know, but help in validating certain items or testing theories.
Yeah, totally. I don't know about you, but I mean, I'm 54 next month. Christ. I grew up in the 70s when there was nothing. There was no phones, no internet. You came home when it was dark because the lights went off on the street. That's how you knew it was time to go home. And you made your own fun and whatever. And things. I think the Commodore 64 ZX Spectrum was my first introduction to what computers were. I think we used to write programming language. I think there's something like 10 go to 20, 20 go to 30, or whatever it was. A really stupid mundane little thing, and then it run the whole screen with that whatever you typed in. But that was my introduction to tech as a kid. I can't remember ever seeing anything else apart from the ZX Spectrum back then that would have inspired me to get into tech. What was it that got you into it?
So, funnily enough, I didn't get into tech till quite late. I've got a microbiology degree initially. So once I started approaching my third year of university, I was looking at the job market and looking at the opportunities for a scientist type role, and there was nothing available in Australia at the time. So I decided to spend another 2 years at university and change my honours over to initially computing, and then I did another year of microcomputing following that, just to change my skill set. But yeah, technology is very mathematics driven. Most of the science degree was heavily mathematics driven, so there were significant synergies. But yeah, it wasn't until well into university that I decided to change.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Was there any mentors that you had when you were going through that stage?
So I had no mentors growing up. For university, I was lucky. I was able to get a Smith family scholarship to help me. And through that, I did have a mentor that opened up some of the broader business opportunities that existed. And that also got me thinking a bit more about my future and what I wanted to do and how I'd want to get there.
That's a big change going from biology.
Not so much. Most of my subjects were quite mixed. Most of them were statistics, calculus, so very heavily focused on the mathematics. So the transition to programming and some of the old languages such as C++. It was a learning curve, but it was possible.
Geez, I mean, that takes me back to my sales days in tech when we were doing networks infrastructure. So you talk about C++ as your language that you started out on. I started out on frame relay. Frame relay, and then point-to-point networks. We were selling DS3s and STEM1s, and we were trying to flog networks to all the big banks. I think I sold the Commonwealth Bank its very first international data network. We swapped them from frame relay to MPLS, and I sold that to a guy called Andrew Matizak in 2003. Shit, that's 20 odd years ago. And Andrew's still a mate of mine, very close friend of mine. He's a CTO of Commonwealth Superannuation now, and also on the Meet Magic advisory board. So just goes to show you how technology evolves. I mean, you go back from your languages of C++. Where is it today, and where's it going, do you think?
That's a good question. I think it's going closer and closer to just natural language. Even the developers today will, I don't want to say cheat, but everybody, Googles, looks at the Git repository, see what other people do, borrow code, share code. And I think that's just going to continue to evolve until people can start writing using natural language, and the AI will be able to put things together for you. And even with testing it now.
I mean, I've got a dev team. Do you reckon I could check their work using ChatGPT? I've got access to our Git repository, and I'm looking at all the backlog that we've got on Jira. Do you reckon I could go and take some of that code and flip it into ChatGPT and it'll check it? Is it that good?
If you don't mind about security concerns, you can absolutely put it in there and get feedback as a reference point. But you see tools in the market at the moment where it will check code for vulnerabilities introduced by developers. You get your positives, your false positives. So you still have to double check everything, but as a starting point, it never hurts.
Yeah. It's I've had, honestly, building tech has been something that's really, it's been a fascinating journey. I mean, we started out with an agency. I'm not going to name the agency, but they left us in a really difficult position. I put my life savings, literally $300,000, my last bit of money that I had, into building the first iteration of Meet Magic. and they left every one of the APIs exposed to the public internet. This is an Australian company, and it was so close to becoming. I mean, we could have been all over the front pages of the Fin Review for the wrong reasons. I mean, you can't get advertising in the Fin Review at the best of times, but you can imagine if you're, all of a sudden your information's exposed and it's leaked and whatever, you've got all the wrong advertising for the wrong reasons. And how have you managed with all that as well? Because I mean, does security come into your role as a CIO?
It does. So I've got two focuses on security. So as part of my day job, I do have to understand our environments, our risks, our monitoring, backups and all of the processes. I also do some consulting in the cyber side for other organizations, especially, APRA regulated organizations, ISO certifications, etc. So for example, we work a 4-day work week. I spent last Friday running a disaster recovery exercise for one of the clients, and I find having the dual focus really helps me in my day job because we're a lot more secure than we actually need to be being an education provider, because I just make sure that the financial services side of things are just embedded in what we do. But it is an ongoing concern. You can never secure yourself completely. You can really only just make yourself less attractive than your competitors and hope people go there.
What do you think it is? I mean, the cybersecurity thing is a rabbit hole you can go down forever. I mean, I just had lunch today. I've still got some of the Korean food on the front of my shirt here. I'd lunch, a very nice Korean actually. I had lunch today with the CISO of Challenger Bank, so David Cowan, and we had Alessandro there, who's a product designer for Zero, and also a penetration tester, a former street rat, who was a hacker and is now the highest level penetration tester working with very, very senior business and government, a guy called Jameson from Devon. And just listening to the conversations around the table about how cybersecurity threats are evolving so fast that I don't know how the tech companies and the vendors are going to keep up, because they're all sounding the same. But the way they're actually getting around, I mean, a lot of it seems to be, to me, social engineering. A lot of the issues are still human related. Are you focusing on a lot of that, or are you focusing on anything to do, mainly tech solutions?
So the biggest threat in every organization is the people. And not necessarily malicious, although that is probably the greatest threat for an organization, a seemingly happy employee who has malicious intent. So the only way you can mitigate there is really with that constant education, constant reminders, providing examples, having them remain vigilant. But you also do need to have a level of tooling in place just to be able to monitor and understand what is normal, what is abnormal behavior. And in addition to that, actually following your controls. So a lot of organizations that get breached, they have the controls in place, they're just not checking it.
Yeah.
In a lot of instances. And that does come back to human error, which comes back to the education. So it is a cycle. But you can only protect yourself as much as risk appetite, budget, and there is also a portion of luck as well.
I mean, a password something that you think about? Because I know a lot of people are still using the word password as their password. Is that something that you look at?
We do. NIST standards, ensure that you have at least 12 characters, mixed characters. I do send around quite often internally. There's a little table that shows how long it takes to hack different complexity of passwords, and it actually does get quite a lot of engagement from staff, and they respond and say, wow, I did not realize my password should only take 21 minutes to hack. But outside of that, we do use 2FA. You have to VPN into the network to access anything, which is again 2FA. So there are other measures you can put into support. But I do, like most organizations, you'll see the odd password that pops up here and there, and you just block it, reset.
Yeah, I think last year was quite flabbergasting. I can't remember what it was. I was sat with I think it was a Deloitte conference, and there was some guy from the government there talking about how many literally attacks were happening last year. And it was something like 1 every 6 minutes or something, which for me, and these are critical incidents that were happening. And obviously they're all worried about the nation state stuff. And that nation state stuff, I think, was it was Iran, Korea, Russia, and China as the 4 major ones. Are those sorts of things in your industry as a whole? Is that something that your industry looks at or worries about?
Look, so we educate children, typically kindergarten to grade 12. So we don't really carry much state-based actor threats. Even the Australian government's focusing on energy, finance, so critical services, water. So we're worried about any malicious actor, regardless if they're a single 12-year-old child who just looked up a YouTube video to state-based actors. But it's not something specifically we are worried about. Most of our platforms, if you gain access to a platform, you can actually learn to improve your English and maths. We don't maintain any data on anything that's exposed. Our core data is heavily segregated outside of what people generally have access to.
I love that. Hackers and get smarter.
It will help with some of those phishing emails.
There's some very smart people in the hackers world. I mean, I'm flabbergasted with some of the stories I've heard recently. But I often wonder about the kids today. Obviously, are the conduit into issues, because I know just from my daughter's teenage years, they were all selling their New South Wales driving license app to get access to the pubs and the clubs, because they were only 17 and you needed to be 18 to get in. So they were swapping information, and they just didn't care about their issues. And you look at America now when they're talking about banning TikTok. Well, why are they looking at doing that? Because of the influence that can be exerted from a foreign power onto those younger ears and minds, which potentially could then lead to something else happening, influential, whatever it is that they're worried about. But I often think that the younger ones are really where the issues could potentially start, right? I mean, I do know there's been a lot of sort of resistance fighting against Chinese stuff at some of the unis in Queensland, for example. There was a kid up there that was trying to expose stuff, and all of a sudden he got visits from Chinese spies almost knocking on his door at home saying, "You better stop that." This sort of stuff goes on. I mean, we don't even see it, but I think that for me, that generation, one, they don't care about their data. They throw it out there, and that could probably be a good thing, because the more that's out there, the more it's hard to find something, I guess. So it's just like hidden in plain view almost. But I guess the future is, I look at things like the metaverse and that sort of stuff. And what are some of the trends in education? Can you see education, for example, going into the metaverse as a thing?
Okay. I think it is possible. Where I see the future is really in that individualized learning, where children are, they're not, if you're in grade 8 and you're at a grade 3 capability, you're not forced to learn that grade 8 content. You can actually really learn at your own pace. And even within a classroom, I'd love to see where children can work within their own ability, given if you have 30 children, there's 30 different levels and skills within that classroom. And being able to monitor the child's progress, and the child being able to either ask for help physically or discreetly if they're not very comfortable doing it publicly, or if they have absence, they can continue to learn with the rest of the class whilst being absent for a while. So I think that learn from anywhere at a pace where you will be able to actually learn the content rather than try to keep up to a specific curriculum is where there seems to be a bit of traction, especially if you look in the US and other markets. People are defaulting to homeschooling. You have some VAI schools such as Synthesis, which prompt that you don't need 12 years of schooling. You can do it very quickly in a much shorter amount of time. And that's where things like the metaverse could give that, forum or mechanism for children to get together, but more so children of that same capability, not necessarily same age group or same geography.
Yeah, it's definitely a massive sector. I mean, I think Go One, the amount of money they raised, I think they're a multi-billion-dollar organization now, which is, I watched them they've just gone crazy, gone absolutely mental. Obviously, technology and the education sector is something that goes hand in hand. I remember watching my daughter graduate year 12 from her bedroom during COVID 2020. So she was the first year 12 that were graduating at home. I got to see, for example, I wouldn't have got to see this otherwise, but when she passed one of her exams, so they did one of the exams, and then when they got the results back, she was actually at home in her bedroom. I got to hear her screaming for joy because she got a good mark, and we wouldn't have heard that if they were in the classroom. And she said to me, "Dad, the good thing about being at home doing this is I can let my emotions out, and I couldn't do that in the classroom because you've got a good mark in the class. You've got to be humble, got to shut up. Got 90%. Don't say anything." But so let's go to this. I mean, the whole point of Meet Magic, Daniel, is all around using technology as a role for social impact. Almost. I mean, CIOs. We've got about 1,000 execs in 5 countries now that log on to our platform and share a little bit of time with vendors for a conversation. Just conversations. There's no selling involved. But each meeting has a positive outcome. Each meeting has a positive outcome on the charity that they've chosen. So, or it could be climate change. It might be that they're interested in, reducing their carbon footprint. One business meeting through Meet Magic can offset over 100 tons of carbon. So, pretty good outcome for 45 minutes of sitting on your bum and having a conversation with someone. Where do you see tomorrow's role in, for technology and its role in social impact? Can you see any future in that?
Look, I think social impact really starts with about transparent communication, understanding what are those impact areas, and being able to like Meet Magic does is get people talking to each other, get them there is, as you said, there's no sales process, and this isn't about Meet Magic. It's just I wasn't quite prepared for the question, but the reality is it is that mechanism where you can interact with people that you won't necessarily have access to outside of that technology. So it does open up the whole world, and also opens up a mechanism where you can open your mind further to those social impacts, social issues, where the world's sort of going. A lot of the social impact certifications that now are occurring are quite fascinating, and the anti-slavery clauses within contracts, and all of that's really creeping into the organizations now, and I think it's actually great.
Well, totally, and I think that safety and inclusion is absolutely a must, especially for marginalized groups across education and across the internet. So I think about those things around, for example, transparent content moderation policies, which could encourage tech companies to adopt something publicly rather than just hiding behind it. And balancing user safety with free speech rights is probably something that can be good. And then looking at things like free speech advocacy rather than and education programs. And I think this is something that fascinates me around. We're sort of seeing a lot of things about don't say this and don't do that. Some talk for and against free speech, but you can actually use it in a really positive way. And that free speech advocacy, for example, tech companies could partner with civil liberties organizations, let's say, maybe create programs that educate users on the importance of free speech and how to responsibly exercise that in a digital space or in a digital education space, and how to engage with diverse viewpoints constructively. I think that in itself is a real positive way to have a social impact with using tech. It's not necessarily just about giving back and supporting charities, but it's about trying to help those marginalized groups be safe and included in what they're doing on those platforms, whether it's digital or it should be the case, obviously in the real world as well. But I think there's definitely a role somewhere with social impact, and I just think that every bloody business meeting that happens, if you're going to have And if you're a CIO and you've got 20 meetings a week that you're having, and a couple of them are brand new vendor conversations, why not have it support a social impact? Why not have it support the cause that you care about? You're going to have those meetings anyway, so there's no skin off your nose to basically push it through this platform and have it do some good at the same time. It's a discovery call, and that's pretty much what they are. It's a bit like Tinder for business, Daniel. It's, have a look what's going on in there and see where it's all going to go. But so your role as CIO, there, obviously, been there for quite a few years now.
Almost 4 years, which is quite unique for me. So I have, I typically start with an organization, usually bring some control to the role, and then once it becomes operationalized, I tend to find my next challenge. This role's been quite good. The next challenge is actually within the role, and we've got quite a lot of scope to stay at the forefront of the market. So great industry. It makes me feel good because I actually see the impacts on my own children. So my own children are my testers for a lot of my ideas and our products. So it goes for them first. I get to see what the broader market are doing, and we've got free reign to, for example, we're implementing our AI strategy at the moment. So we've got a lot of trust within the organization, which makes it a good place to be.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the other stuff, do you give back at the moment in your role? Or how do you do that currently? How do you give back at the moment?
So I do some official mentoring through the AIMS program, where I help skilled professionals new to Australia get their foothold in the market.
That's great.
So that's the more official, but also do continually support old people I've worked with in the past. For example, I spent this morning helping a teammate from 10 years ago fix their CV up because they're looking for a new role. I caught up from when I was in Melbourne a few weeks ago. So I do spend a few hours each week just helping people, move to that next step in their career and or find a new job, or helping people get a foothold in the Australian market.
That's very cool. And I can't help but think that's got to feel good, and that's really a lot of the value is really about feeling and how good you feel by doing something good. We've had a couple of people on our platform. I think one of them was Michael Ross. He's a CTO of Qantas at the time. I think he's the CTO of Jetstar now. I think he had about 10 meetings. And I called him. I said, Michael, why are you doing these meetings? He said, oh, they feel good. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, at the end of that meeting, there's something good going to come out of it. And he said the natural flow on from that is, if I feel good, I perform good. And if I perform good, the outputs are better. So I'm more productive. I'm a better leader. I'm more engaged. I'm like, well, that's actually a really positive thing. So what you're doing by giving back is actually really quite selfish. You're actually helping yourself, which I think is really good. So that's, for me, I often think that giving back should just be built into everyone's daily or weekly routine. And it's often we hear that a lot of execs just don't have time to go volunteering at the shelter. They don't have time to go volunteering, to serve food. But this is just a simple, hassle-free way for them to give back, and if you can feel good about doing that, then happy days. There's a win all round. I also want to give a quick shout out. I don't know if you've heard of Alteryx, but Alteryx, you mentioned AI. Obviously, data is a big part of that. And we've got a couple of podcasts coming up with a group that's just come out of the NBN discussing AI, because a lot of the government departments at the moment, obviously, they all want to test AI and how it's going to work in their environment, but they've got no budget allocated. And what's the first thing you're going to have to do? Well, you're going to have to go and have some conversations with some vendors to understand what the pricing looks like and how it's going to work, and try and build a business case to get some funding. So we're going to try and bring some of that together, bring some of the government departments and companies that don't necessarily have a budget but want to test it, and give them a helping hand. So, but Alteryx has been one of our trusted clients for 2 or 3 years now. Catherine Wong is the head of marketing up there, and they basically take all the customer data that you've got and help you make sense of it, get rid of the spreadsheets and whatever. So I just want to give a big shout out to Catherine and the Alteryx team, and just say thank you for being a great Meet Magic supporter. I've actually got goose pimples thinking about that. So Now, I've got a couple of quick fire questions which you won't know of, Daniel, shortly. But one of the biggest things that we hear from execs is around the over targeting that you have as an exec. Now, this question is not necessarily meant to be, are all salespeople bad? Because we know they're not. But tell me what your experience is from being targeted. We often hear that, for example, execs get 30 to 40 requests a day, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's text, cold calls, cold emails. What's your experience like?
My experience is closer to 10 per day. The majority are essentially the same reach out. I'm yet to find which school they all go to where they learn to send the same 4 variations of the reach out. But where it does get a little bit annoying is it is really the same 4 approaches used repetitively 10 times a day, which after a while you do become numb and you don't necessarily take the time. The best salespeople I've ever worked with or interacted with were those that don't look for that quick close, quick meeting. They actually take the time to build a relationship, get to know you, and you actually become friends after a while. And there's never that expectation that you will buy anything, but when you do have a need, you will give them a tap on the shoulder because they are front of mind. You've got to know them, you trust them, and they have a bit of an understanding of your business at that point in time, or you might be for a different organization.
It's really interesting because that's exactly what we hear. Part of the coaching that we give any new vendor that comes on is no selling, no pitching, no demos, no PowerPoints. Unless the execs ask for it, it's pure conversation only. Because we know that 95 to 98% of your target market are not in the market to buy your product at this time. And so your job when you have these conversations through Meet Magic is to go and build trust and build a relationship and let the conversation flow from there. Don't try and sell that. It's like you go on a Tinder date. You don't ask them to marry you on the first date. But there's a lot of young junior burger salespeople that think, and I think often this is driven by the behavior from Wall Street, for example. You might have a big tech company that's listed on the NASDAQ, and they're driven by quarterly numbers. And if they don't hit those quarterly numbers, their stock gets demoralized. So they've got no choice but to go and try and close a sale. And that drops down really, really heavily and quite fast from the top. You will close a deal. You will hit those numbers. Do whatever it takes. And so this is where all this outbound desperation comes from these salespeople. It's kind of crazy that they think they can walk into a meeting with a CIO and get a purchase order. I mean, you've got to be pretty lucky for that to happen, for one, but it should be a long-term approach. Absolutely, long-term relationships is what we're advocating here as well. But it's just a whole crazy world, and I hate to say it, Daniel, but it's going to get worse. If I call you David one more time, please slap me. It's going to get worse because AI and automation is what's fueling those 4 sequence emails that you're getting, and it's just garbage. There's nothing personalized about it at all. When I was in sales, when I was a lad, we had to go around to the office and sit down in the lobby of the office and read the annual report and understand what Daniel's priorities were for the year. Go back to the office, steal the annual report if we could, go back to the office and pick up the phone and call Daniel and say, Daniel, I was just reading in your annual report that you're doing this year. I think we can help you in this area, and have a conversation around that. But it was purely targeted. I mean, and these kids today, they've all got the internet. They can find out what you've done on the weekend if they look hard enough.
And that's the challenge. Even phone calls, if you leave me a message, I probably will call you back. But if you just call it from an unknown number, leave no message, I'm never going to answer that phone number.
Yeah, it's a funny old world, David. I think we're aiming to break a bit of that stuff. I think with whole Meet Magic thing, we're trying to encourage. We definitely don't want the execs that come on our platform to be harassed or pressured to close a deal, because that is definitely not what we're all about. It's 45 minutes. I don't know how we've managed to go this long. Obviously, we're chatting, having a good time, but I've got 5 little short fire questions. I think they're called Socratic or something. I don't know where that word comes from. But are you ready? And there's no right or wrong answer. Salesforce or HubSpot?
Salesforce.
How long does it take you to get ready?
Depends what for.
Work.
I work from home, so 20 minutes.
Nickname your first girlfriend gave you?
I can't repeat that publicly.
Okay. Do you respect Kanye West?
I don't know Kanye West, so it's hard to have an opinion without actually meeting him.
Very diplomatic answer. And finally, say something in an Asian language.
Ni hao.
You are so diplomatic, Daniel. That is very, very cool. Right, it's been a good chatting with you. 6 o'clock almost here in Sydney. I think it's dinner time. It's Poets' Day in England at this time, 6 o'clock. You know what that stands for, don't you?
No.
POETS? Piss off early, tomorrow is Saturday.
Yep. Okay, that makes sense.
But I hope you have a cracking weekend. Thanks for spending a bit of time with us. This has gone on to YouTube, LinkedIn, and I think Facebook. So there's some valuable little bits of lessons in there, I think, for anyone that is thinking about reaching out to any business leader. And so thanks for sharing some of those insights and a bit of your background. And if there's anything we can do to help you with your connections, we've got a community of purpose-driven leaders that are all about purpose, and that really is about giving back. And it seems to be something that's growing in popularity. We've developed a bit of a movement around that now, and that movement's growing. So if you hear of anybody looking to give back and looking to make a bit of a difference in their own life, because it really does make a difference in your own life, point them in our direction, and we'll say thank you.
I absolutely will, and enjoy your weekend.
Thanks, Daniel. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.